And we're live. So today I wanted to talk about a little bit about my perspective on orthodoxy and marriage, the relationship between both of those things, and let's say men and women in general. Uh, a friend of mine recently shared with me a video that came out by an Orthodox content creator that I let's say I would say I respect. I don't watch his content a lot, but I'd say that I respect him. I think he's doing good work, and that when he speaks, he what he says is generally, let's say, correct. I haven't seen much of his work, but I've seen this video uh, that my friend shared with me, and what he said in the video was sound advice in general. I think, like, I recommend his content to a certain degree. Perhaps I don't watch his content because he's too zoomer for my taste. I'm more of a millennial. Uh, I'm turning 31 in January, so um, like I guess I'm an old wolf, and I'm not hip. I'm not cool. Also, uh, I want to say that none of what I say is meant to be taken as a criticism or as a personal attack in any sense. This are simply my opinions that I've gathered from my experience, both as a secular person and as an Orthodox convert. So I haven't been Orthodox for too long, but I've been reading about Christianity for about 10 years, and I've been, let's say, attending an Orthodox parish for three, and being super, let's say, committed to gaining the phronema, and being able to articulate that worldview not only in terms of, let's say, an intellectual narrative, but also into an embodied narrative. And I think uh, the problem with, let's say, a lot of more intellectual Orthodox people and recent converts in general is that they intellectualize the faith a lot, and they speak a lot. And this is common not just with Orthodox, let's say, converts, but also like young men in general, that like we are able to speak perhaps very eloquently about certain topics, but perhaps we do not, let's say, embody those values as much as we want to, simply, if not because of a lack of moral character, but simply because we haven't had the opportunity to do so. So this is not me dissing Orthodox style at all, on the contrary. But I do think that there are some dynamics that have to be talked about when we're dealing with a topic of marriage. And one is, let's say, the fact that men, to get married, they are expected to have been tested and tried, if not by anybody in particular, by society in general. Even, let's say, being successful financially, those kinds of things, they are tests that the community places upon you. So the onus is on men to prove themselves, and young men have simply not proven themselves yet. Not to the point that, let's say, would be satisfactory to a really rigorous person. So, in a sense, this is not me, let's say, reinventing the wheel, or trying to, um, let's say, recycle old red pill arguments. But to be honest, there is some truth in what red pill or people like Jordan Peterson say, that women are hypergamous, and they, let's say, they they use society's criteria to determine, let's say, whether a mate is viable or not. Like that, they, in a sense, take social cues to determine the worth of certain potential partners. um I I'm hesitant to bless that as a, let's say, as a good, um as good behavior. It could be part of the fall, but I'd also say there is some truth to that, in the sense that um, women, or wise women, will see the kind of opinion that other people have in respect to a potential partner, and that cuts both ways. I know a lot of people that are spurned because of, unjust, unmerited accusations. But in the same sense, I think like that factor playing a part of the way we deal with, let's say, our community, um, that is a sign that you have a community in the first place. So without further ado, I already had a few, I would say several things that I wrote about in different times. I'll read you some of them. I'll share some of them with you. Um, I think that being a single man doesn't in any way undermine my opinion. Perhaps being a loser does, and I would consider myself a loser in a lot of respects. But I think I know how women think. I think I know how men think. And I think I know how worldly and orthodox people think in general, and everything in between in this particular topic. And I think I can offer something to this conversation that few people can, which is, let's say, a perspective that has had a few losses, and that has, let's say, played, on both on both kinds of spheres, and a capacity to articulate, let's say, the society we used to have in antiquity and the society that we have now. So I want to say something about young men, and this is about men in general, but it applies to young men in particular, because what what defines a man is not his power, but his death. There's a few parts in Corinthians. I'm gonna read it to you. Like, I think it's gonna be worthwhile. So this is Saint Paul writing to a letter to the church at Corinthians, of whatever, you understood. So, though I speak with the tongues of men and angels and have not charity, I am become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal. And though I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and though I have all faith so that I could remove mountains and have not charity, I am nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned and have not charity, it profiteth me nothing. Charity suffereth long and is kind. Charity envieth not. Charity vaunteth not itself, is not puffed up, doth not behave itself unseemly, seeketh not her own, is not easily provoked, thinketh no evil, rejoiceth not in iniquity, but rejoiceth in truth, beareth all things, believeth all things, hopeth all things, endureth all things. Charity never faileth, but where there be prophecy, they shall fail. Where there be tongues, they shall cease. Where there be knowledge, it shall vanish away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is not part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. But for now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even as also I am known. And now abideth faith, hope, charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity, love. So charity and love are synonyms. You know, at the beginning of this letter, it's talking about, let's say, the transcendent aspect of love. It's characterizing the way love is expressed, like to give us clues as what is the nature of love. But we have here like a tension, right? A philosophical tension, in the sense that um, love is both transcendent and it is immanent. So here we're talking about, let's say, a tension between let's say, um, work and faith, in the sense that you might be doing, you may have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge. You might be, let's say, capable of discerning. You might be capable of doing all sorts of wonderful things. But if you don't have love, then it's worth nothing, right? And then we have, let's say, nearing the end of this chapter, we have sort of like the opposite message, in the sense that, and this is what a lot of people miss: when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. What is being talked about here is self-sacrifice. It is death, proper death, death in the right sense. This is not, as Catholics interpret, like a justification for the beatific vision. That interpretation is ridiculous. Um, when that which is perfect is come, when you're dead and within the kingdom, then that which is in part shall be done away. This means not that you'll gain, let's say, an intellectual knowledge of God as God Himself, but rather in your death, you will find the fulfillment of yourself compared to what was part of you. In life, you can only see in part because you haven't died yet. You haven't finished your work. But when you die, you have finished your work. You know your purpose. You know everything you've been, and if that is in God, then that which is perfect is come. Like, you know yourself in God. But that which wasn't in God shall be done away. That which was in part shall be done away. So something that does not, let's say, hit the target, it's done away with. So, and the next line: when I was a child, I spake as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. Here we have, let's say, a letting go of the part for the whole, a letting go of, let's say, self obsession, in place of like giving yourself fully. There is no more um, attempting to, let's say, play or forestall death. There is not a growing, a maturity into plenitude of potential, but a plenitude and a maturity of actuality, of dying, and in dying, moving on to eternity, right? So this world is falling away. It's already slipping through our fingers. And what I wanted to talk about in regards to that has to do a little bit with charity, with chastity, and with what a man is. Because I think that for men, adulthood is reached around the age of 28. That's when men start becoming naturally more grounded, and the brain is starting to gain cognizance of its limitations. Because when you're young, uh, let's say when you're 18, your brain is super powerful. Um, Even close to 25, you have a lot of energy. You can concentrate super hard. You don't get tired. And everything is still relatively new. Not like when you were a child, but things are super new and super, let's say, salient. Experiences are very fresh. But at 28, more or less, you get tired a bit sooner, but you've had time to experience life, to gain a sense of yourself, to have experienced your cognitive peak, and you're now experiencing a little bit of decline. After 25, you're starting to decline cognitively. So your intelligence is starting to crystallize a little bit, and also your motivations are starting to, let's say, dull, because you have had so many experiences, and your motivations have changed so much that you're no longer fueled by intense emotions. And that energetic, youthful, explosive energy is starting to dull and dissipate in favor of a more poised, simple, and narrow focus. So now, like, your personal goals start to become more salient. This is when you need to get your stuff together. You are supposed to have been building yourself to this point, but now you are, let's say, more stable in who you are and your identity. Some men can gain that poise sooner. Yes, I do not deny this. And it also has to do a little bit with your character and with your personality. But in my experience, my personal experience, you won't find it in men younger than 28. And you can tell this in the very way that they move in space. There's a huge, huge importance in, at least in my book, in body language, in, let's say, the inflection and the tone in our voice, um, the speed at which we do things, and you can tell more or less the age of the people, or the mental maturity, by the way they behave in space, and let's say, the way their spirit, let's say, lingers in their words. Men are slow, they're deliberate, they're obvious, they're methodical, they're goal oriented, and self-aware in this sense. We are sturdier, we're straighter, we are, let's say, sources of stability in the world. Boys are twitchy, insecure, indecisive, ambivalent, mercurial, and they're usually playing roles, like they're figuring themselves out, like they live in a drama they haven't completely puzzled out. Men are aware that they're dying, but boys are caught up dying, but trying not to die fools. While they're in their fretting, they are acting like fools without noticing. So, in that sense, that it's not just a personality, or a disorder, or immaturity in a psychological sense. Men in general are way more poised. Part of it could be attributed to testosterone, sure, in the way that, let's say, the character is forged, but reality has certain complexities, and let's say, men eventually face those complexities to the point that they sink or swim. We don't have luxuries most of the time. There are people who are man children. There are people who are spoiled brats their whole lives, but that's the exception, not the rule. And so, having said that about men, and about, let's say, the way that society puts expectations on men to perform, I think we can move on to the topic of chastity, before we move on to, let's say, women, and what people say women should be like, what they should like, and what marriage should be. I think there is a symbolic reason why chastity is related to, let's say, the fall, and why the inability to wait, and needing to have the fruit before its time is related to being unable to accept truth, reality, and the way things are. I'm going to read this to you because I prepared it for this video in particular. Of course, in modernity, we are bombarded everywhere with the argument that you need to try out sex before marriage, otherwise, you could be dissatisfied for the rest of your life. This is a lie that has effectively led to promiscuity, to people not forming marriages, and to divorce. So its fruits should be obvious to those whose minds are not darkened. Because now that you have tried the fruit and given yourself license to look for better fruit, you will try to recreate a perfect reality by your own hands, dooming yourself to insatisfaction because you could not accept things the way they are. Chastity is important because it means that you value others and that you value yourself. Lack of chastity is marked by impulsiveness and indecision, because he who is not capable of respecting the fidelity inherent to proper marriage is a consumer of the other who will be condemned to search eternally for a perfect option without ever finding it. The inability to commit may be the result of either there being no suitable partners available, sure, that could theoretically happen, but more probably the person is thinking too much, too highly of themselves to effectively function in the world of human relationships. Selfishness, narcissism, and insecurity. It's dying of thirst in the middle of an oasis. So I think that, let's say, is an important it's an important thing to notice. The approach I'm taking, and the reason why I'm taking a more sociological approach, is because I see politics not as an abstract, like, interpretive layer, or layer that is simply the domain of the public interest, but rather politics is the way that we relate to each other. That's the way I see politics. So I think that politics in that sense uh, is most of the things that we do. Unfortunately, poor definition perhaps, but I think that the way men and women relate is a political thing. So I wanted to go on to the meat of the subject. Orthodoxy and marriage. Women nowadays are told, like, a lot of contradictory things about how they should be, what men want, and what their role is. I'll try to speak on some of it from the perspective of a former womanizer turned Orthodox Christian who's tired of hearing the same platitudes time and time again. Not all that is said is wrong. Take what I say for what it is, an imperfect and incomplete commentary, but I want to address some things that people are not talking about, or at least not talking about in a way that I think is conducive to the betterment of others. No, I'm not gonna say this. Women should avoid extremes, basically. Neither the caricature of the trad wife who is completely helpless outside the kitchen, the bedroom, and the crib, nor a man eating boss babe who cannot cook or raise children to save her life. Those two models are both faulty. Careers are legitimate, but they have to take a secondary place, since the worth of a woman in marriage is in raising healthy and virtuous children. Women are dignified through their child rearing, that is, their power and their domain. However, this does not mean that she can't work, can't get an education, or that she should be mindless. On the contrary, it's just that only the 1% of women should even think of having a career, because careers take time to take off. And if you're going to have children, only wealthy women should even try something like that. And even then, they will eventually be poorer mothers, because they will have to, let's say, pay other people to fulfill some of the roles that mothers usually do. Going to college is not a way to save yourself. On the contrary, it lessens you. Because people, like, parents are sending their daughters to college in order to, let's say, secure a future for them, and it's actually doing the opposite of what they're trying to do. It's quite sad, honestly. So the reason why college usually lessens a woman is that it implies debt and years lost. This is pure economics, right? It implies the possibility of corrupting ideology. Yes. It does not always lead to better pay. Again, economics. It tends to make people entitled and feel like they deserve more. Yes, because a little bit of education is worse than no education at all. Um, because it doesn't teach much substance, and it gives the illusion of wisdom and maturity without any actual wisdom. College after high school is a continuation. It's like kindergarten for adults. So this also applies to men to a lesser degree, and it applies to a lesser degree because men have to focus on their faith and also on providing. It's on men to provide, unfortunately, but it's true. Unfortunately for me, at least. Women should be pure, not just in legalistic terms, but also in their own hearts. This is going back to chastity. They can't be putting out thirst traps on the internet. They can't be rubbing themselves against men or letting themselves be fondled during dates. They have to be mindful of, let's say, barriers. They cannot indulge in those things, because not only it pollutes them, but it pollutes the future that they might have with other men. They cannot be too overtly forward with men, nor can they be pick me girls. They need to be perceptive, wise, and learn how to recognize a good man. A great candidate will be either able to marry soon or chase throughout the courtship. Before, like in times past, like people would court only in public. There wouldn't be any private courting to prevent, misbehavior. I would say no more than 2 years of courtship, since the opportunity cost is huge. And women need to be wise as serpents and innocent as doves to not waste other people's times nor their own, nor time nor their own. So a secret about how men think. This is going to be super useful. The lover is always lower status than the wife. For those who think, oh, he's dating another woman, but he's thinking of me and this and that. If the guy is married, um, first of all, of course, this is sin, but the lover is always lower status than the wife. That's why it's their lover. Um, some men will be drawn to aspects of a woman only to string her along or use her sexually because she doesn't feel like enough for him. Be careful about that. In the same way that the lover is lower status, it's like pump and dump kind of stuff. Sorry for being crude. Um, like men who are uncertain, they might want to play with the feelings of a woman because whatever validation to spend time that they enjoy, none of that is conducive to marriage, and it speaks very poorly about the man, but also poorly about the woman who'd accept something like that without actually like being able to notice. So it is either chaste courtship or nothing. The reason why adults used to supervise courting was precisely to help their own kids not blunder into normalizing deadly mistakes like abusing each other emotionally or sexually. These experiences produce long lasting scars, but now in the West we have removed the adults from the picture, creating chaos and fostering cynicism, infantilism, and ignorance. Because of the fall, children aren't born virtuous and need to be taught how to court and to some degree to be supervised to protect both parties, even throughout marriage. It's not optional. People are not individuals, and marriages are not just between two people, they're a community affair. So I'd suggest that people start acting like members of communities. We're hardly ever mature enough to court, and every sin is bigger than it seems. Human beings need community to thrive, even so called adults. Like I said, I don't think that 18 makes you, being 18 makes you an adult. The West is rotting because individualism is not conducive to society flourishing. We should not normalize heartbreak nor sin like liberal culture does. Sometimes we need to protect other people's children from our own, because fallen people tend to lead with their desires over their conscience or mind or news. So this is a big problem for us Westerners, but it's becoming a problem everywhere. When it comes to men and women, the match has to be made in a way that both parties feel like they are relatively even to start their trek together, not because of competition, which is always toxic. You're not competing with your brothers and sisters for a mate, but because or with your partner, you're not competing with your partner to see like who's more attractive, who's more valuable in the sexual marketplace, because um, that value oscillates with time. Uneven matches tend to foster resentment in regards to how the burden of responsibility is shared. And to some degree, that responsibility in spiritual terms is somewhat equal. But at the same time, I'd say that men having to lead makes them more responsible. Um, but that's for God to decide ultimately. I don't want to get in there. Obviously, they have the goal of struggling together towards sanctification. This is a burden both must carry, and I would say extended family must also take part in these joint struggles. But I'd also add that like the goal of struggling together towards sanctification is the purpose of marriage, and like should be the topmost priority. Like in the same way that a person is ultimately responsible for their own salvation, I think that's, let's say, the beginning of a principle of subsidiarity, in the sense of like you cannot be entirely responsible for the salvation of another person, and this means that you have to respect a certain level of autonomy that, let's say, is untouchable by your authority. Not because you cannot have a say, but rather because even if you did have a say, it wouldn't annihilate, let's say, the responsibility that the other person has. So this also means piety, looks, health, status, and to a lesser extent, money, age, and maturity must be somewhat matching on the whole. But here, even in terms of value, doesn't mean that they're both supposed that both that both parties are supposed to be like providing equal value at the same time, or all the time, or any of those egalitarian ideas. A marriage is a sacrament that establishes a new church and a joint body. I mean, a new church and a new gathering, a new small church, rather, and a joint body in the sense that they become one flesh. It implies working together in a partnership where there's giving and taking, and both partners need to be able to forgive and collaborate, even as the other party falters, naturally or not. So mutual sacrifice requires this. It's not a perpetually lopsided relationship where, like, the man is always responsible for everything, like as if it was like a father. And pride will breed resentment because if you're competing with the other person, if you're expecting things to be better than they are, um, you will resent the other party's weakness and you'll blame them. Um, Nobody wants to be shackled to dead weight, and this is the key that makes religion appealing, by the way. True religion makes what would seem like dead weight into a salvific struggle for the good of both partners, structuring not just your community but your whole cosmos. Um, so there is a way out of, let's say, pain and suffering and death and all those bad things. Sin does not get to define reality. As a matter of custom, men's proof of character is usually front loaded for them to be married, while a woman's value is primarily spiritual in a secondary role. She's supposed to add to her husband's spiritual life and not detract from it, to help him express their identity in the form of a family. And in that sense, it is a gamble that pays long term or not at all. Men are expected to provide stability and good character, but don't even know if their wives will be fertile, for example, before they get married. Um, Much less if their wives will keep their commitment to God and be good and submissive wives. Bad wives want to express themselves and are unwilling to die to themselves so that their husband's authority is the one to rule. So, what I mean to say here, perhaps it's unclear, is that bad wives, they want to be like the center of attention. They want to be they want to be the ones to decide. They're subversive. And even if wives are bad, unless there's infidelity, there's no way for the man to divorce them, meaning that they have to be especially good judges of character while at the same time having proven themselves to the community. So, in that sense, men, being the stronger party, uh, are actually expected to sacrifice more than women. This means that wives cannot be too young, not because it wouldn't be good for women to be married as soon as possible, but because few men are able to predict if a young woman will be virtuous. In the same way that that a man's character has to be tested. A man has to also, let's say, be able to discern if a woman will be virtuous or not. Because I don't care if she's like very pretty, super young, etc., etc. If her character is not, let's say, even begun to be set. This is partly why women's long value long term is why women's value is long term and more uncertain, since beauty is not the highest value, or else that makes simps, by the way, or else a woman's value would be strictly pornographic, which is where secular society is heading, and why like women have like this very very sharp decline in secular society. Let's say they're super attractive when they're young, and that fades away fast. This is because our society has been pornographied or Californicated, let's say. And this skewed vision about value is also why modern divorce laws are ridiculous and objectify both men and women. If a woman's value is related to the spiritual life, procreation, and family, it makes no sense for them to be given both the ability to destroy the family and also get half the partner's money after choosing to do so, retroactively destroying the value that they were supposed to offer on worldly terms. It's like if it were, let's say, a negotiation, the man has provided this whole time, and you have taken away what the reason why he was providing, and now you're shackling him to keep on providing even after you destroyed what you were supposed to be offering. No, it's a ridiculous arrangement that no secular man would ever get married on those terms unless he's a gullible idiot or he makes a prenuptial agreement, which is a disgusting perversion of marriage in the first place. Asking a religious man to commit to a woman under this secular law is a very big deal because she must be truly pious. A woman's attractiveness as a partner is obviously linked to her youth, her purity, her beauty, her fertility, if not for nothing, because one can be virtuous very young, and because youth is a promise of years that one can offer to a relationship, because you grow together and you build together. The sooner you start building together, the better. But virtue is the most important factor. That's why riches are not the most valuable asset that a man can bring. The thing is, taking the pornification of society, the dating market is a winner takes all. Valuable partners are scarce. So, on equal grounds of virtue, beauty is a great asset that will definitely play an important role, if not for anything, because true beauty is not superficial and does not fade. If anything, true beauty starts to shine ever brighter. Age differences should be generally in favor of men being older, but no more than a decade if both are very young. Primarily because the younger people are, the more unstable and changing their character. Also, lots of young women get insecure about their lack of maturity and their inability to repay, when the man is leaps and bounds wiser. And contrary to what other people say, people don't often catch up because men and women are different, because individuals are different, because even within a good marriage people can have different outlooks in regards to their own life, because men and women have different outlooks in regards to the way they see the world. um, Also because it's okay if people are different. um, it's okay if one party is smart or knowledgeable or this and that. The important part is that they're both pious and they're working together to reach God. So I think that debts must be forgiven and can also be repaid in the distant future. So like if you're going through a rough patch in a marriage, like the other party should, let's say, help you. And people's, let's say, value fluctuates if they were looking for a partner in the sexual marketplace. I don't think that's a good measure. That implies, let's say, an underlying spirit of competition within the marriage that will necessarily destroy it, because competition is of the devil, not of the kingdom. The reason why age differences can bring problems is that we can't expect young people to be humble or to grow in the proper direction. And unless there are wise family members helping out, differences in orientation will always create dissatisfaction. This has to do with the fall. Uh, Perhaps I was a little bit, let's say, harsh in previous videos, uh, criticizing um, criticizing other people's opinions as feministic. Um, and there is some truth to what I was saying, but honestly, the fall makes us all crappy. So, um, like, I think we have to start with the presupposition that the other person will not be perfect, uh, and give the other person room to be imperfect in order to grow into perfection. I think that's the Christian way to approach these things, but it doesn't mean like tolerate anything and everything. If the couple is already humble, then age differences are not that big of a deal at all, especially if the rest of the variables compensate. So that's the real answer. That's the lack of nuance that I was seeing. Let's say when people were generalizing so broadly on, like, no, because women need to work, because if not, the relationship is too lopsided. No, no, no. That's a practical consideration given the fall. It doesn't mean that everything must follow that rule. That is, to make that into a rule would be a feminist conception of the world. In these cases where there is an imbalanced relationship in terms of a certain milestones, like milestones that you reach at a certain age that you're supposed to reach, that are more difficult to reach sometimes, especially in our day and age, one has to have a clear idea of what the other person can and must offer. You have to measure your expectations. Good women should be willing to endure poverty. And since men themselves are very poor nowadays, it's inevitable that good women will be poor as well. So being poor is not an excuse not to marry, not to have children, those kinds of things. But again, uncertain people like to wait until every condition is perfect before they make a step. And this is the situation the majority will be in, waiting too long for the right conditions or the right person to appear. And they never will, because the other person is not going to be perfect. Romanticism has done us dirty in this respect. The reason why historically in some periods of time the high class offered a dowry, this is going to be interesting, I think, for you, for those who want to know a little bit about different time periods. Why the high class offered a dowry is that women have to be protected often from themselves. Modern women think that God's curse was for them to labor in pain and scoff about it. But what they don't see is that the really significant part of the curse is that they would desire men. That is the curse. Yes, you will love men. You will love men despite your protestations. You will love men and you will admire men because we're strong. Simply because of that, because we're strong. And that is a curse because some men just simply appear to be strong. Some men want to, let's say, give all the, um, let's say, signals of being men, but at the same time aren't real men. So, lacking good men, women will latch onto bad men, which is most of them, by the way, in order to fill that void and that desire and try to gain access to a decent membership of society because men are the gatekeepers of society. It's not women. It's married women could be gatekeepers of society. Elder women could be gatekeepers of society. But the reality is, in any society that is thriving, women gain the status of their husband. So the husband is the one that determines that the future of that woman in terms of like the people that this woman will associate with, the people with which this woman will be counted among. So the dowry was meant to help women secure good and high status men who would take care of them because by accepting the dowry, they would be honor bound to honor it. So, like all things being equal, a little bit of money to help secure a good future for your family makes a candidate more attractive. This is not a selling of flesh. This is simply a way to practically ensure that men achieve their goal and fulfill their role as men, while at the same time helping women achieve what? A virtuous husband. We have become so cynical that we don't understand why this was the case and concoct ridiculous feminist theories that only further alienate women and make them think that they can be that they can be valuable members of society without attaching themselves to a godly role, such as a wife and mother or as a nun. There is no way to force spinsterhood or even widows into being central to the community because they're actually not connected. They're not connected to the community properly. And forcing things like that always ends up poorly. So good women in other times were bought, and a good woman is worth their weight in gold and precious stones. So see that buying and selling these things are only relative to what you're trying to aim at. It's not about elevating or putting down anyone, least of all women. What I'm talking about here is not a matter of implementing dowries or buying women, nor moving away from those ways of thinking as if they were primitive or demeaning to anyone. I mention them for us to understand the context. Good and smart people have always recognized that the value of virtue is more than gold. So there is absolutely no problem in trying to entice virtue to look our way in such a manner. That is the proper use of beauty. That is what an award looks like. It's trying to, you know, make virtue more common. That is why we give awards. Gold is not bad. The question is, what will you do with it? Gold is meant to foster virtue, and to those who have everything, everything will be given, because in reality, those things come after one is seeking the kingdom. The gold is understood to be trying to recognize something that cannot be bought in order to make it long lasting. It's about, let's say, giving durability to things. So, giving your gold to virtue is the best thing that can be done with it. It is the proper use of gold, giving a lasting body to image what is spiritually eternal. It doesn't mean that it's always virtuous, but power begets power, and it's not always bad that society works this way by elevating the already elevated. Spiritual virtue is better than worldly wealth, and giving wealth to virtue, as well as donating to the church, is a sure way to see those funds properly used and directed. So it's a way to actually, let's say, participate in the priesthood of man, in the let's say in the offering of man to God. This is the opposite of using gold to corrupt others, be it through bribery or fleshly seduction, like overwrought adornments, or through corrupt distribution. We cannot wear golden crowns if we are peasants or merchants. We cannot crown ourselves with expensive jewelry and makeup. And we cannot sell the perfume that is meant for God to give to the poor. If all purposes need to be aligned to God, then women should strive to be virtuous from a young age. That's the most important thing. Men don't care about the formal education that women have as much as we care about their piety, their virtues, their beauty, their fertility, their youth, their culture. Let women study scripture and homemaking before they try to become lawyers or doctors. Modernity has made men and women who don't know how to run a household or fix an electrical outlet and sold them to the Gnostic fantasy. They sold them the Gnostic fantasy that they should rule the world because they attend a few lectures given by degenerate, pretentious midwits and then shipping them off to ratty office cubicles. So you believe that you're a king, but you're worse than a slave. Like people in the Middle Ages had way more days off than you. Wealthy women or women married to wealthy men will be free to pursue certain careers if they so choose. But even in this case, this has to be measured against the opportunity cost, like how the family will raise children and how many they can and will have. Because our time is limited and we shouldn't offload certain responsibilities to hired help. So certain careers that take more than a decade to take off are probably not going to pay off financially for the betterment of the family. Also, it's not good for a woman spiritually to have to oversee men if she is of high status or materially wealthy, since it distorts her view of herself, potentially offering delusions of power over men that are not real. Several feminists have crossed certain boundaries, expecting men they provoked to hold back only to find out the wrong way that they were not dealing with modern feminized men, but with true savages who ended their lives violently. This is super common among certain brown people with a certain, let's say, sword that wants to conquer through certain faith that wants to conquer through the sword. So only queens could get away with that, and not even then. There's no amount of finger wagging that can stem the tide of rancor that builds up in a society when people act without consequences. And this kind of lack of awareness also applies to male rulers when they think they have more power than they do and antagonize their people. Respect and propriety are very important, and they have been lost in our liberal culture. Lots of young women feel that they are not ready to be mothers. And it's true that most of them really aren't, partially because they haven't been taught how, as if the previous generations expected parenting to be an instinct ingrained in our genes or a choice that we have to make. So somehow, liberalism has destroyed the social fabric and transmission of culture by destroying individuals, by telling them to pursue whatever they want. That's how we're destroying ourselves. Modern families have done nothing to encourage women to learn how to be mothers like they used to. And the problem with all of this is that motherhood not only becomes an afterthought, but a timing issue. Women aren't ready to settle down until it's too late for them. Modern people think that teaching women to be mothers is demeaning to women, and then since it's all cultural conditioning, it wants to argue that this true education is arbitrary only to then replace it with useless secular ramblings and degeneracy. This has gone as far as setting up relationships as if they were for personal entertainment. And marriage is an optional long term goal. One should date for marriage, and marriage implies sacrifice. Anything less implies a broken home and a dysfunctional community. I'm sorry to say. It's true that we have to seek the kingdom of God first, and then all shall be added onto us, but we have to actually take steps in that direction. Marriage shouldn't be an afterthought, a side quest, or relegated for when you finish university or when you kick off your, when you have reached your career milestones. It is the single most important decision that you can make. And the very idea that this is not important, the systematic marginalization of marriage, speaks of just how fallen our society is and how much it needs to repent. God will allow really bad things to happen to us because of our collective disobedience. There is nothing more important in the world than to have a truly Orthodox home. So, guys, we cannot keep playing this game where we think that um, we can blame others. We have to repent. We need to repent. Otherwise, there will be nothing left to fight for. So I didn't want to leave you with a doomer um, perspective, a doomer take, but um, honestly, people should really take a good look in the mirror and see what they're worth. And if they don't realize that, there's a reason why we say the meek shall inherit the earth, because the proud will destroy it in their stupidity. So anyway, that is that. I hope you have a blessed Lent, and God bless. God bless. See you around.